Great power is hidden in every person. This is the power of one's spirit. The power of the spirit can make a person invulnerable to the troubles and sorrows of the world. This is how a person becomes happy. But is any person capable of developing the power of one's spirit? Absolutely yes. How? With the help of the creed of the warrior of the spirit, which in the 14th century an unknown samurai left for the edification of descendants. To understand the depth and effectiveness of the warrior creed, we will first tell you who the warrior of the spirit is, and then how to apply the warrior of the spirit creed in ordinary everyday life to attract the power and become truly happy. First, let's figure out what spirit is and who is the warrior of the spirit, and then study the creed of the warrior of the spirit. Two directions of mystical philosophy will help us lift the curtain of secrecy and come closer to understanding the meaning of the two deep magical concepts we have identified. They are Gnosticism and Nagualism. Gnosticism arose at the beginning of our era on the Mediterranean coast among Jewish sects. To understand what spirit is, let us turn to the schematic drawing in the form of a center, radius, and circle, which the followers of Gnosticism resorted to explain the mystical nature of man. The spirit is the center of the circle, or the divine essence of man. In order to evolve and reveal its divine potential, the spirit, with the help of the soul, accumulates experience in the physical world. The soul is a radius connecting the center and a point on the circle. The infinite number of points on the circle is a set of physical bodies into which the spirit incarnates, passing through a chain of births and deaths in the material world. Incarnating in bodies, thanks to the development of the physical body and the sensory impulses of the soul, serving as a response to this development, the spirit collects experience and becomes more mature from incarnation to incarnation. Thus, according to the ancient mystics, the spirit reveals its divinity in order to ultimately merge with the one force, which is its source and created everything that exists. Nagualism is an ancient teaching of the Indians of Mesoamerica, which was told to the Western world in the 20th century by the mysterious writer Carlos Castaneda. Nagualism brings the student closer to understanding the concept of warrior of the spirit. This mystical teaching asserts that in everyday life a person is energetically depleted due to one's destructive lifestyle and one's manner of thinking. To overcome exhaustion, each individual must reconnect with one's spirit. The only obstacle on the path to spirit, according to Nagualism, is human stupidity. Overcoming the oppressive effect of stupidity, as well as the vicissitudes of life created by stupidity on the path to knowledge of one's own higher nature, is the essence of the concept of war in Nagualism. Any person who takes the path of war with one's own stupidity and restores connection with one's own higher self is a warrior of the spirit. The warrior of the spirit overcomes the callousness, recklessness, and unconsciousness characteristic of an ordinary person and finds freedom in the spirit, which is inaccessible to the troubles of the world and invulnerable to human stupidity. That is why the creed of the warrior of the spirit, which anyone can follow in everyday life, allows you to restore connection with your higher nature, defeat stupidity, become invulnerable, attract the power of the spirit into life, and find true happiness. Now we will tell you how to apply the creed of the warrior in everyday life. I have no parents, I make the heaven and earth my parents. I have no home, I make awareness my home. I have no life and death, I make the tides of breathing my life and death. I have no divine powers, I make honesty my divine power. The warrior of the spirit does not perceive oneself solely as a body. Through the spirit, any person is one with all nature and the world. Therefore, the warrior of the spirit sees one's beginning and one's continuation in the world, heaven and earth. Knowledge about the world and about one's own essence is the only thing in which the warrior of the spirit constantly resides and with which one feels own life. The warrior of the spirit is one with knowledge, so one made knowledge own home. The warrior of the spirit is fluid and changeable. One constantly changes and dies in own old role, changing one's state and deepening own understanding of the laws of the universe. Then the warrior of the spirit is born again, like the fiery phoenix bird, in order to serve the laws of the universe and one's own spirit in a new, more perfect role. This means that life and death for the warrior of the spirit are a change in one's state and not a stop and total zeroing. Faith in one's higher self and service to the higher self is an honor for the warrior and the source of one's power. For any person, the first lines of the message of the creed of the warrior of the spirit mean the need to learn to perceive the world much deeper than everyday life allows. Exhaustion and oppression caused by the everyday life are consequences of a person's superficial perception. Everyone needs to be able to see reasons. To do this, the individual must perceive oneself as an integral part of nature and the entire human family. The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches a person not to become attached to objects and things. It is necessary to dispose of objects and things wisely, but not to serve them or bow before them. A person must serve to educate and free oneself from stupidity. Thanks to knowledge and enlightenment, a person is able to get rid of stereotypes and cliches, overcome one's stupidity, and become free. Nagualism says the following about knowledge: nothing in this world is a gift. Whatever has to be learned must be learned the hard way. Knowledge of one's divine essence or spirit can free a person from the fear of death. The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches to be honest with oneself and people, as well as to be respectable, sincere, and kind. Honesty makes a person strong, free, and happy. Friends, write in the comments whether you agree that honesty is the basis of a strong and a powerful person. Expand your answer in as much detail as possible. Your opinion and thoughts are truly important. Friends, any theory must be supported by practice. Knowledge should be applied in everyday life and contribute to its qualitative improvement. To do this, we created a community on Boosty, which is a workspace that motivates you to improve your life, understand your own essence, and unlock your inner potential. In the community, you will find, among other things, special posts for subscribers, videos with scripts and podcasts published in early access, practices for developing perception and qualitative improvement of life, the opportunity to join the Three Sons private community, where you can communicate personally with the creators of the project and find like-minded people. Friends, support our project and join the Three Sons community on Boosty. I have no means. I make understanding my means. I have no secrets. I make character my secret. I have no body. I make endurance my body. I have no eyes. I make the flash of lightning my eyes. The warrior of the spirit is guided solely by the power of one's higher nature. Therefore, every moment of life the warrior serves this power and is inaccessible to the fleeting desires and manipulations of the world. Unlike ordinary people, one sees own goal, which is to serve one's divine principle and the manifestation of this principle in the material world. Everything else is insignificant for the warrior. The warrior of the spirit sacrifices the insignificant for the great. This shows warrior's awareness. The spirit of the warrior is a mystery for the world. No petty or fleeting desire can lead a warrior of the spirit astray from the path which has a heart. This is the will and endurance of a warrior. Knowledge is the guiding star, illuminating warrior's path in the world of stupidity and ignorance. The light of knowledge dissolves the darkness before the gaze of warrior's eyes. The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches a person to be selective and the ability to choose. Anyone who becomes discerning can be mindful in own life. A conscious person does not succumb to the manipulations and delusions that one encounters in everyday life. At the same time, the warrior's creed tells a person that any individual is a magical being, and not just a set of data from a passport. A person reveals own inner potential when one explores oneself and one's capabilities, solving everyday problems and thereby developing own character. At the same time, The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches a person to concentrate on one's goal without wasting time on trifles. Self-education and enlightenment are necessary for every individual. Thanks to education and constant sincere work for the benefit of oneself and the people around oneself, every person discovers own power and finds true happiness in life. I have no ears, I make sensibility my ears. I have no limbs, I make promptness my limbs. I have no strategy, I make unshadowed by thought my strategy. I have no design, I make seizing opportunity by the forelock my design. I have no miracles, I make right action my miracle. The warrior of the spirit is in touch with own divine nature, understands its signs, and therefore is always sensitive to oneself, people, and the world, reacting to any change. The heap of thoughts typical of ordinary people does not bother the warrior of the spirit, since one is focused on one's own destiny and on serving the higher nature. Nagualism says, "There is no other task in our entire lives which is more worthwhile than perfection of the spirit." The warrior of the spirit is true to this statement and completely trusts own higher self, entrusting one's life to the higher self. Therefore, the warrior is accompanied by luck. The filigree and decisiveness with which the warrior acts when one has made a decision is an inexplicable example of efficiency and miracle for the ordinary world of people. By incorporating the principles of the warrior's creed into daily life, anyone can improve own character and develop feelings that will make one's worldview deep and one's life alive and fulfilling. Sometimes empty thoughts or thoughts about everyday life take possession of a person and exhaust oneself. The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches everyone to abandon superficial thoughts and devote own mental activity to the awareness of one's own destiny, which lies beyond the boundaries of everyday life. The creed of the warrior teaches a person to believe in high ideals and the origins of which everyone can find in the depths of own heart, following the manifestations of your sensual, developed soul and giving preference to them, refusing impulsiveness and stupidity, is the right action. With the right thoughts and actions, power comes into your life and you learn what it really means to be happy and not to seem so. I have no principles. I make adaptability to all circumstances my principle. I have no tactics. I make emptiness and fullness my tactics. I have no talent. I make ready with my talent. I have no friends. I make my mind my friend. The warrior of the spirit has a vision of the essence of things and understands the reasons for what is happening. Vision allows the warrior to be flexible and overcome any situation, emerging victorious. The tactic for the warrior of the spirit is emptiness and freedom from the stereotypical and prejudiced behavior characteristic of ordinary people. Refusing the stereotyped perception of reality, the warrior fills oneself with power from the spirit. As a result, the warrior of the spirit truly lives. The warrior's mind is a model of sharpness and clarity. That is why the warrior has 100 talents, and any task in one's hands is performed with complete dedication and perfection. The warrior of the spirit does not rely on one's surroundings, but on own instincts and the clarity of own mind. Therefore, a warrior is invulnerable to both one's own stupidity and the stupidity of other people. The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches a person to renounce prejudice and bias. This is how every individual can look at any situation as if from the outside, in its full extent, and thanks to this find a solution to any issue. The creed tells a person to give up idleness and fill oneself with a desire to create and develop own inner creative potential, benefiting oneself and the people around oneself. By studying one's inner essence, education, and enlightenment, anyone gains mental flexibility and becomes inaccessible to stereotypical thinking typical of everyday life. A person needs to learn to rely on oneself and own strengths thanks to the clarity and purity of one's mind. Such a person will be accompanied in life by power, success, and luck. I have no enemy. I make carelessness my enemy. I have no armor. I make benevolence and righteousness my armor. I have no castle. I make immovable mind my castle. I have no sword. I make absence of self my sword. The warrior of the spirit knows that one's time on this earth is limited. Therefore, one does not waste a moment in idleness and stupidity. The warrior overcomes both of these conditions. For this reason, the life of a warrior is full of work and events. One perceives oneself as part of the world around oneself and as part of a large human family. As a result, the warrior of the spirit is benevolent and fair to the world and people, just as one is fair to oneself. A warrior is inaccessible to the sorrows and worries of everyday life. Meeting with them, one abides in the spirit. Thanks to this, the warrior overcomes both the sorrows and worries of ordinary human life with joy and a heart full of reverence for the unknown. After all, the warrior is invulnerable to the stupidity and cruelty of people because they know nothing about the warrior. They only see the personality that the warrior of the spirit shows to people. Therefore, the warrior is not attached to the opinions of people and one's personality. One does not depend on people or on own personality, but abides in the spirit. The warrior of the spirit is greater than one's personality. That's why the warrior is free. Everyday life is dangerous because it inclines a person towards idleness and pleasure. The warrior's creed teaches a person to work for the benefit of oneself and other people, using own talents and honing one's skills and craftsmanship. Petty squabbles and aggression in everyday life make a person embittered. The creed of the warrior of the spirit teaches a person to concentrate on one's inner essence and draw power from it, as well as to overcome the aggression of everyday life through kindness and faith in justice. Everyone is capable of achieving what one sets out to achieve if one focuses on true goals that reveal inner potential, as taught in the creed of the warrior of the spirit. Not taking your personality, and especially personality-related failures, too seriously is the key to resilience and power. Power leads a person to a happy and fulfilling life. A person in everyday life lacks a strong and clear philosophy on which one could rely and overcome the difficulties and hardships of everyday life. The creed of the warrior of the spirit is the message of such a philosophy with clear, deep meanings and to the necessary extent simple so that anyone can apply the ideas and meanings of the creed in own life. At the same time, the principles of the warrior's creed are incredibly effective and efficient so that a person can live a happy life and be filled with the power of one's own spirit. Being strong and living a fulfilling, happy life is not an accident or luck, but the legal right of any person whose true home is in eternity, there, where the gods themselves live.